Okay, Chair, the meeting's now live.
Okay, right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Schools Forum. My name's David Jeeps. I'll be chairing today's meeting. Please be aware that members of the public are invited to view this meeting online, and you are currently being recorded. Forum members are requested to keep your microphones on mute and only turn these on when I ask you to speak. If you have any questions, comments, or wish to make on any of the reports, please in the chat function write RTS. So let me just get the chat function up. Super. Right. I'm just going to do just for the purposes of, I think Lisa is doing just the attendance. So if you could just let me know if you're here. So Jackie Collins.
Yeah, here.
Thank you. Dave Jones.
Present.
Is here. David Jeeps is here. Obviously, Sherdal.
Yes, I'm here.
Jason, I know, is here. Jason Crouch. Joe Cooper. I haven't seen Joe yet. Okay. Laura Flitton from Court Lane, and a very warm welcome to Laura. I know you were in the previous meeting, but welcome from myself. Sean Preston. Not in. Nathan Waits. Niz. Chris Purnell. Ooh. Sharon Burt. Councillor Horton. Councillor Udi, I've seen. Good afternoon, no. Councillor Udi. Councillor Smythe, Judy Smythe. Councillor Lynn Stagg, we've seen as well. So good afternoon, Councillor Stagg. Councillor Norton, we've seen. Good afternoon. Terry Norton, we've seen. Simon Barrable.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Thank you. And Cara Jewell, we have seen as well. Good afternoon, Cara. So those people, I'll go back. Joe Cooper, is Joe with us? Sean Preston, is Sean with us? Nathan Waits, Niz Hardingham.
I've had apologies from Niz come in.
Thank you. Chris Purnell, Sharon Burt, and Councillor Horton. And I think we've got today observing.
I'm here, David. Sorry.
Hello. Sorry, Susie.
That's okay.
Right. Sorry, Susie. Thank you. And then I think observing we might have Anne Chapman and Victoria Page. And joining us, we have officers from PCC, Mindy Butler, Alison Edgerton. I think Alison Jeffrey might not be here.
She's on leave.
She's on leave. Julia Catherine, Angela Mann, Mike Stoneman, and Lisa. So good afternoon and welcome to you all. Right, Alison Edgerton, do you want to just Egerton? I've been watching too many films. Alison Egerton, do you want to just do apologies, please?
That's right. It is Edgerton. You had it right the first time.
No, I think I confused you with a famous actor very briefly, but I'll move on.
Okay, so we've had apologies from Debbie Anderson, Caroline Corcoran, Alison Jeffrey, and Niz Hardingham.
Ah, super, brilliant, thank you. And declarations of interest, Alison. I believe you're just chasing one. Is that right?
I am. I have had a declaration of interest sent through to me from Chris Purnell, but I'm having a few software issues accessing it, so he's sending me through a hard copy, which I'm waiting to receive at the moment.
Super duper, thank you. And do you want to update us on membership changes? I know there's a few changes.
Yes, there's quite a lot this time. Okay, so we have two new members. We have Laura Flitton, who's joined us as a primary academy representative from the University of Chichester Academy Trust, and Chris Purnell, who's joined as a secondary academy representative from the Kemnall Academies Trust. So welcome to both of you. We have two members that are continuing their tenure. Nathan Waits as the secondary academy representative and Cara Jewell as the early years representative. In addition, we have Caroline Corcoran, who's joining next meeting from Salton's Academy Trust as the secondary academy representative. Going forward, we have 2 tenures that are due to cease before the next meeting. That is David Jones as primary maintained head teacher representative. David has agreed to stand again, and I'll be writing to primary head teachers after this meeting to see if they are happy for him to continue. And also Sherdall as the maintained primary governor representative for primary schools. Sorry, I said that, primary schools. And again, Cher has agreed to stand, and following a recent governor's briefing, it was confirmed that her representation was supported. So again, I'll be writing to everybody to confirm after the meeting. We do have some vacancies. We have one academy secondary representative vacancy. We have circulated information to all the academy secondaries in the city, and I'm still not had a response, so I think we'll be chasing again after this meeting. At the moment, we have one academy primary representative vacancy. I did have 3 volunteers, but one has now dropped out, so I have 2 volunteers. Following item 7, it is potential that our academy primary representation will increase by another post, in which case I'm hoping to confirm to those 2 people that they can become the new primary representatives, in which case we will be full there, but it will depend on item 7. And that's all on the membership updates.
Brilliant, thank you for that. And as we said earlier, very, very warm welcome to Laura and to Chris, and huge thanks to those of you who has extended your tenure on this group. That's very much appreciated. Right, now you will be aware that I've missed a couple of meetings. I was poorly with the dreaded C, so and I would like to just sort of put it on record that not only Dave Jones did an excellent job at chairing, I hear, he did a most efficient job at chairing. So thank you very much, Dave. In particular, I think the first one you had very little notice from me, so I'm really grateful that you were able to step in and do such a superb job and set the bar so high for me. So with that in mind, if we just go through the minutes, first of all, just checking for accuracy. So I'm looking in terms of your packs, I'm looking at page 5, first page of the minutes. So everyone happy with that in terms of accuracy? Page 6, page 7. Oh gosh, and that's it. Conclude at 4:52. Super. Okay.
I haven't got a chat function, but on page 5, you've got Chris Purnell listed as Thinking Schools Academy Trust, and it should be the Kemnall Academy Trust.
Yeah, got that. And I think, Alison, that was the point you were about to make, wasn't it?
It was, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, and I understand there were no actions from that meeting, and therefore, unless anyone is unhappy that these are not a correct record of the meeting, if you are unhappy and don't wish to accept the minutes, could you please let me know in the chat now? Wait for 5 seconds. And therefore, given that no one has dissented, we will take those minutes as an accurate reflection of our meeting, previous meeting. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on with vigour, we have early years sufficiency update report, and this is for noting, and Mindy is going to take us through that. So Mindy, over to you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm just going to summarise the report that I've written, just to be timely. I think that we can say that we're moving forward with cautious optimism. In January, we only had about 1,800 nursery children in attendance, and now in May, in our last data check, we had 4,000. So the numbers of children are definitely coming back into early years again, which is great to see. Unfortunately, we have had 4 nurseries close across the city and 2 childminders resign their post since the start of COVID. I would say that a couple of the nursery providers had been struggling prior to COVID-19. So as much as we tried to support and help them, I think they just felt that they'd had enough, really. On a positive note, 2 nurseries have been registered over the last 6 months, and they've started and opened. We've had a huge surge in childminder inquiries as well over the last few weeks, which has been really positive. We've still got some larger daycare facilities who are struggling. We had a couple of settings that were on gym premises which have been closed for a very long time, so they lost a lot of, well, they lost all of their children while they were closed. One has reopened again, and the reports that the numbers are coming back in slowly and steadily. The other one is closed until September because they just didn't feel that they would be able to be financially viable this term. We've also today had notice that the nursery at Lakeside is struggling, obviously for obvious reasons, because not many office workers are in the office at the moment. But they're hoping that situation will improve, you know, in the next few months as things open up again. We've had our quality and sufficiency officers are starting to go back out into the community again, and they've had regular contact with providers. And really, on the whole, it's been a really positive response. This summer, the numbers seem to be increasing really, really steadily, and they've been so grateful for the help and support that they've had, actually. So many people have asked me to express their thanks for the COVID discretionary grant. It really helped settings. That alongside in the autumn term, the DfE allowing us to fund on the indicative budget. I mean, some settings were so low in numbers that they were literally floated by up to £25,000-30,000 with that, because their numbers were so low. So, but we had our recover and reset group this morning, and that coupled with the quality and sufficiency officers ringing round, everybody says that their numbers in September, some are looking really good and are full. Some of the smaller settings are still anxious about their numbers, and we've noted all of those settings, and we will signpost parents who come to us to those smaller settings for support. So on the whole, it's looking a lot better than it seems to be, picking up quicker than I thought it would. I don't think we're out of the woods yet, but we haven't. You know, we have spoken to pretty much all of our providers over the last few months, and you know, there are some still hanging in there which we're supporting all the way. But on the whole, it's thanks to, you know, to the various grants and support that they've been given, people are just about, you know, getting back on their feet again, which is really positive.
Good, brilliant, thank you. Jason Crouch.
Thank you, Chair. Mindy, thanks for the report. Just a question. You mentioned 4 nurseries have closed and 2 have opened. Has that really changed the sort of the geographic mix we've got in Portsmouth? Have we got any areas where, you know, parents have to go a lot further for childcare support?
No, not really. Our biggest trouble spot, I think, coming up is going to be it's not a trouble spot, but it's an area. Baffins has always been low in childcare places, and one of our providers is moving from Baffins to elsewhere, so that's going to leave quite a big gap. So we're hoping to be able to replace that provider back into Baffins, because that's an area where there's definitely a shortfall in childcare. But on the whole, it's fairly well spaced out, actually. And one of the new providers is up in Fort Pembroke, so somewhere that we haven't really had before, and it's a sort of nature nursery. It's all outside and quite a new thing. So yeah, we don't anticipate any gaps. We can't see any gaps, and we've had no parents reporting that they're having difficulties finding places either. So,
okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mindy? I mean, it's going to be an interesting one, isn't it? When as companies, you know, what the new economy will look like is an interesting one. And you know, it'll be something I'm sure we'll be coming back to look at in the future at Schools Forum. But Mindy, thank you for that report, and we will move on if that's okay. So we're not voting on that one, so we're just noting. So we're going to move on to agenda item 6. I think, Julie, you're going to take us through this one. I'm absolutely fascinated to understand what an AVI no isolation robot looks like. I am absolutely fascinated by this, and I'm guessing it's a personification of a child in the classroom. And I think it's amazing. I really do. I'd love to go and watch one of these in action. Anyway, I'll shut up. Over to you, Julia.
Thank you, and I'm very happy to provide a link to a website where you can see it in action, because I agree it is amazing. It is like a very small little person that sits on the desk. Anyway, this paper is so I was asked by Schools Forum to evaluate. It's 3 projects, but I brought them all together in the same paper because they're all about managing demand on the DSG high needs block funding. So that's the thing that they have in common. So previously it was agreed to fund the SEND Monitoring and Review Hub. So that's the first project. The second one is, as David said, the AV1 no isolation robots that we've funded as a pilot project. And the third one is a request to fund something new, which is referred to in the paper as the turnaround project. So I'm going to deal with each of those in turn. And the first 2 are for noting by Schools Forum because the funding's already been agreed. And this is just a very early evaluation of how what the impact is so far of these 2 pieces of work. As I say, the third project is a new project, so I am recommending that Schools Forum agree to fund the turnaround project work, but I'll come back to that later in the report. So let me first turn to the Monitoring and Review Hub. So in February 2021, Schools Forum endorsed and the Cabinet member approved the funding to establish a SEND Monitoring and Review Hub. So this was funding for 4 new members of staff, and the purpose of setting up this new hub was to work on behalf of Schools Forum to ensure value for money within the high needs provision, both in the city and including spending on out of city placements as well. So it was a spend to save initiative, and it was again about managing demand, but also making sure that we were getting value for money. And the key focus of this group of 4 posts is on annual reviews. So in section 3.4, I've set out the ways in which those members of staff are working to make sure that the support specified within an EHCP is being delivered and achieving the intended outcomes, to make sure that the EHCP is being funded at the correct level in line with the funding criteria. Where there's evidence to suggest that the support required should be changed for any reason, or that EHCPs should be ceased, then that's actioned. To proactively review all of our out-of-city placements to, again, make sure that we're getting value for money for those, and to ensure that timescales are met responding to changes of provision. So that's the focus of the team. Due to the COVID pandemic, the recruitment was delayed significantly. So we had hoped to get staff in for the beginning of the academic year, and that wasn't possible. So we didn't actually have all 4 members of staff in post until just after February half term, which is why this is a very early review. So obviously with training and induction, the team are now fully operational and engaging in all of the activities set out in 3.4. So as I say, this is to increase the accountability for GSG spending, really focusing on that value for money and reporting back to Schools Forum on that. So it's proposed, as the funding has already been agreed for 2 years, it's proposed that I bring back a full review after that team's had a full 12 months of operation, and we can look at the impact of that on spending.
Do you want to take questions now for this bit, or would you want to do it?
So I think we do it in 3 sections. So yeah, if I take questions now, it's probably easier to do.
Share.
Hi, yes, I know what you say about the fact that obviously they've only just started. I just wondered if they're able to kind of hit the ground running, because do we have a centralised record of when each EHCP starts so that they can start the reviews? Have they started those already?
Yes, absolutely. We had a very large backlog of annual reviews because the local authority receives the report from the school and then has to respond to that within timescales. We had a backlog that we needed to respond to, so the team have already worked through the whole of the backlog and are now proactively getting involved in annual reviews that are happening now. And obviously, part of that was the statutory deadlines for the phase transfers that happened at the end of 15th of February and end of March. It will mean that PCC staff will be able to be actively involved in more annual reviews, which I think will be a positive thing, and obviously we'll be able to respond much more quickly when there's a request for a change of funding.
Okay. Are they noticing any difference in because of COVID to the needs in the EHCPs? There's not been a difference in the needs in EHCPs. We have seen a continued increase in the overall numbers of EHCPs, so a continued increase in the EHCP requests and a continued increase in the overall number. So that's something to keep an eye on. But no, the needs haven't changed as a result of the pandemic as of yet.
Thank you, Chair. Any other questions on this first section? I mean, from my perspective, it seems an eminently sensible way to proceed. So I think it's a really good initiative. Over many years on forum, we've often spoke about out of city placements and having people sort of proactively looking at those is a really sensible move. So from my perspective, it's a good move. Before Julia moves on, any other questions? Otherwise, Julia, please, let's talk about no isolation robots.
Thank you. Yes, so these little robots are amazing. They don't look like people, they do look like robots. They're very small, they sit on the desk in the classroom, but they are absolutely fantastic in enabling the child who's not able to physically attend school, who is sitting at home. They can see through the eyes of the robot, they can put their hand up to answer questions in class, they can speak through the robot. They are absolutely included in everything that's going on.
Does the little robot hand go up?
It's got a light. There's a light system, so there's a light. So the light changes colour basically when the child wants to put their hand up. If the child doesn't want to be asked a question, they can change colour to say they're listening, but please don't ask me to speak. If they're not feeling up to that. So yes, and they change their colour to ask the question. We've had so it means that children can go on trips. Go on school trips. They can absolutely be included in everything that's happening in the classroom. They are brilliant. So we funding was agreed to carry out a very small pilot, small scale pilot. So we have 6 devices in the city at the moment. We've deployed them across 5 schools. So we've chosen primary schools, secondary schools and special school. So far, 7 children have benefited from it. And the feedback that we received, so we've asked for feedback from the schools, from the parents, from the children, obviously. Feedback's been very positive. What we've learnt is that AV1 robots don't work for all children. So we need to be quite careful in choosing the right child and circumstance who will benefit from these robots. Often it's children who we want to keep that relationship with the peer group. So maybe if they're going to be out for a short period of time, or we're not wanting them to lose that connection with the rest of their peers in the class, then they can be really effective. Interestingly, they've been used more widely in primary in Portsmouth, but nationally they've been used more in secondary. So I think we want to explore more with secondaries how we can make appropriate use of them. But really positive for those children that they've benefited for. I've included some of the feedback, just a summary of some of the feedback in the paper, if you're interested, including so feedback from pupils and from schools and parents. So we are recommending that we continue to have AV1s as part of our offer. So for some children, for some children they won't be right, for some children they will. We've learned a little bit and we'll continue to learn which circumstances will they be most suited for. So what we're proposing is that we allocate an AV1 robot as part of the inclusion support panel fair access process, where we identify children for medical tuition. So at that point where we're making a decision anyway, we'd look at, does this child need to access the medical tuition available from the Harbour School, or would an AV1 robot actually work better in the circumstances? So it's part of our offer. It doesn't replace tuition, but it's a much more cost-effective way of providing that access to education for those children in the right circumstances.
No, I mean, as I said, absolutely. I think it's a really, really interesting initiative, and I'd be personally, and I'm sure I've seen lots of nods of heads around my virtual screen here. I think we're all very much interested in seeing how this project works, and wish you guys every success with it. But it sounds fascinating, absolutely. Couldn't believe it when I read it. Brilliant stuff. Right, any questions for Julia on robots before we move on? Okay, right, Julie, do you want to take us through to Turnaround Project?
Yes, lovely, thank you. So this is the third project, third piece of work, and this is different in the sense that this is a request for this project to be funded. So the Turnaround Project was funded by Department for Education grant funding, which ended in August 2020. So it ran for 18 months. It focused on Key Stage 3 pupils, mainly those accessing short stay school and other pupils in the Harbour School. And it was focused on working with the family and the child and both the Harbour School and the home school, working with all of those partners to enable a successful reintegration back to the mainstream school. So it was a very focused project, which was, evidence showed, a high success rate. So in fact, 85% of the pupils that were worked with by the Turnaround Project successfully returned to their mainstream school. And it was the relationship-based family support and the positioning of this team in between all of those partners. So they weren't seen as part of either school, but they were able to work with the family, with the pupil, and with both schools to really provide that bridge between the alternative provision and then the return back to mainstream school. Shall I pause to answer that question now, or shall I keep going? And
yeah, no, if you're happy to, so I think that's share.
Yes, I was just interested because the evaluation data looks really positive, but I was just wondering what we're comparing it with.
Yes.
Have we got anything to compare it with?
Yeah. So I don't have the exact figure to hand. I haven't included that in the paper, but our reintegration rates were much lower. They were causing us concern. So alternative provision is when a child needs a short period of time out of mainstream, and the aim of alternative provision in Key Stage 3 is always to return the child back to a mainstream school, even if ideally their home school that they've come from, if the relationship's broken down, perhaps a different school, but they are children whose needs can be met in mainstream. So the reintegration rates were much lower. So this significantly increased. It was a very focused, intensive piece of work, but it definitely had the right outcomes. And the key, if I just probably get to the end of this section and then pause for questions, it probably makes more sense. But the reason we wanted to focus on this was that we want to make sure that we are freeing up those alternative provision places for other children that need them. So unless we've got that throughput, then very quickly the places we've got become filled. And if we can't get those children who could and should be back in mainstream back successfully, or if that reintegration, if they try and reintegrate and then that's not successful and then they need alternative provision again, we don't have the right number of places for other children who need that intensive support. So it was really about getting that throughput. So the proposal is that we fund to really build on the turnaround work, that we fund 3 workers to enable that work to continue in the city to increase reintegration rates again.
Thank you, Julia. Jason, I think you have a question.
Thanks, Julia. Just wondering, you probably almost started to touch on it there. You're looking at this as a drive to increase capacity and throughput. What's this report suggesting might do to that sufficiency, that capacity we've got at Harbour?
So this, alongside other work that we're doing, will confirm that we've got the right capacity, but crucially to make sure that those children who most need that support get it. So the big piece of work that we're doing alongside this is we're reviewing the alternative provision that mainstream secondary schools commission themselves, to make sure that we and sharing best practice across the city, and to make sure we've got a real continuum in place. So what we want to ensure is that we've got a clear offer for mainstream schools for those children that need it, and when that's been exhausted, there's a kind of a consistency of approach, and then the next layer up that's commissioned from the Harbour School then is there to pick up those children. If they get that intensive support early enough, we would hope that they can reintegrate back. Of course, it's different. That's why we want to get in at Key Stage 3, because of course, once you get to Key Stage 4 and pupils start their particular courses, heading for GCSEs or whatever, it's much more difficult. So we really want to get in early, where there is a good chance of being able to bring about a successful reintegration.
Thank you. Cher.
Sorry, yes, it's me again. I just wanted to...
No, don't apologise.
Just wanted to follow up, really, because I think this sounds really, as with the other 2 initiatives, this sounds really, really positive. I'm just thinking that I'm just keen that as we go into delivering it and measuring the impact going forward, I think it's really, really important that we're clear about what the comparative, what we're aiming for in terms of improvements and what the comparative data is, because this is a really, really important area. So we need to be looking at a lot of different aspects in quite a scientific way almost to see what it's giving us. But no, I really support it. It's good.
Thank you, and I'm very happy when I report back. If I'm reporting back to schools from, I'm very happy to add in those comparative figures. I think that's a very helpful point.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions for Julia before we move to vote? My only observation, Julia, is in terms of, I think again, I echo Cher's point. I think it's a very sensible approach. But my only observation is in terms of the reintegration, it's worth looking not just immediate reintegration, but where was that child 2 terms or 4 terms after the project? Because I think that'll be an interesting area to look at. Okay, if there's no other questions, then what I suggest we do is we are going to be asked to note the first 2, i.e. the progress the monitoring and review hub has made and the AVI no isolation robots. And we are being asked to endorse the, oh, sorry, Alison, you've just popped up there. Alison.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. You've literally just picked up that we're being asked to endorse rather than approve.
Yeah, endorse. Yeah. So we are being asked to endorse what I think is already the cabinet members' decision, which I think is a good decision. Although I shouldn't say it prior to the vote, but endorse that. So, do I have a proposer for approval of the recommendation? Pause.
Happy to propose, Chair. It's Jason.
Thank you. So Jason to propose. A seconder. Is that Cher to second? Oh, Sean Preston was happy to second, and therefore the recommendation has been proposed and seconded. I will now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. If there is no dissent, the proposal is passed. And therefore, I'm asking now, are there any objectors to this recommendation? If so, could you put RTS in the chat? So only put RTS if you object. And therefore it is carried. Julia, as ever, thank you. Carry on with the good work. Do keep us all posted about the robots and all the other great work you guys are doing. So thank you very much. Schools Forum Constitution. Angela, I think you're going to take us through this one.
Thank you.
Super.
So the paper sets out the proposed new schools forum constitution, which is at Appendix A. There's two proposed changes. The first is the membership of schools forum, because we review this using the previous year's October census to make sure that we take into account changes where there's been a conversions.
It might just be me, Angela, but you're not coming through.
Resulted in a change to the percentage. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, kind of. Keep going. Watch our faces.
Sorry, I'll start again. So the paper sets out the proposed new schools forum constitution, which is Appendix A, and there's two proposed changes. The first is the membership schools forum. This is reviewed annually using the previous year's October census pupil data.
The suggestion, the suggestion from Jason is we turn off our cameras.
If I take myself off the camera, I think it helps if mine goes off. So, can you hear me better now that I'm off camera?
Yep, seems to be better. So that's a good suggestion. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Sorry. So the membership needs to be reviewed, and there has been more academies this year. So we're proposing a slight change to the structure, and that's in the table at 4.7, and it compares it to the current structure. And the other change to the constitution is to make it explicit that we as schools forum can meet virtually. Our previous constitution was not specific on the matter of attending in person rather than virtually. So when the temporary amendment was made last year to the guidance, we didn't change our constitution. Now the guidance has made this permanent, so we're proposing to change our constitution to make it explicit that schools forum can also meet virtually. So those are the changes.
Brilliant, thank you.
I don't know if there's any questions on that.
Yeah, and just whilst if you've got a question, RTS in chat, please. Just to explain to members that when we come to item 10 on the agenda, I will be seeking your views about whether we're happy to continue with virtual meetings for the time being, which I think for the next few is probably very sensible. But we will come to that. So any questions about the membership makeup? Obviously the makeup of the city is changing. There are more academies, less maintained schools, and any questions about the fact we're going to do things virtually? Okay, right. So what we'll do then is I will be looking for a proposer and a seconder in a second, and therefore we'll be voting on the recommendation that School Forum approves the revised constitution as outlined in Appendix A, which will take effect from today, the 26th of May 2021. Chair is proposing and Mr. Jones is seconding. So thank you, Dave, I should say. The recommendation has been proposed and seconded. I'll now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. If there is no dissent, the proposal is passed. Are there any objectors? So if you do object, please put RTS in the chat. Okay, therefore, since there are no objections logged, we thank you and we note that the recommendation has been approved. Thank you very much, Angela. And I think, Angela, you're also leading on the next item, so hopefully your technology is okay to talk us through the school-specific contingency request from Manor. Angela, are you okay to speak?
Thanks, David. Can you hear me?
Yes, well, I can, yeah.
Excellent, brilliant. Okay, so this report details a request by Manor Infant School for the use of the school-specific contingency to cover a shortfall in funding as set out in Appendix 1 in the business case that they have made. Appendix 2 sets out the criteria for the use of this fund, and the report sets out that the council is satisfied that the criteria for this fund has been met by the school. So I don't know whether there's any questions about either the cover report or the business case that Manor Infant School have set out.
Share the question.
Hi, yes, sorry, I just, we all know accidents happen. I just wondered if there's been some kind of procedures put in place to try and guard against a similar clerical error in the future.
I think, Julia, you're probably best placed to answer that one, if you're okay.
Yeah. Yes, I'm happy to answer that. Yes. So I think this was a consequence of the move to remote working due to the pandemic. So all staff working from home, and so due to that, there was an oversight where some of the information that should have been checked wasn't, and it was misplaced virtually, if you see what I mean. So we have changed our procedures to make sure that that can't happen again. And of course, the change in the census date meant that it had a bigger impact than it would have ordinarily had. So it was a combination of both of those factors.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Sean.
It's a really quick question. Obviously, this issue has occurred. It's totally reasonable, in my opinion, for that to be rediverted. Just the question was whether it's cropped up in any other schools that may have not shouted about it, whether any checks have been done just to make sure no one else is disadvantaged.
Good question.
We're not aware of it happening anywhere else. We've obviously double checked as far as we can, but as far as I'm aware, it hasn't happened with any other schools. We've checked as far as we can, and no one's alerted us to any other issues.
I suppose really, if you are a school representing a school phase, then through your appropriate forums, do raise this as a potential. But hopefully, it is a one-off. It was almost inevitable. This sort of thing's going to happen when you've got a whole shift of bureaucracy online. So it's completely understandable and no fault of Manor Infants whatsoever. Therefore, if there's no further questions, what I suggest we do is we look for someone to propose and to second the recommendation that we approve the request from Manor Infants for the financial support to the sum of £17,485 from the school-specific contingency to cover the shortfall as outlined. Dave Jones is proposing, and to second we have Mr. Crouch, Jason Crouch, to second, and therefore the recommendation has been proposed and seconded. I will now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. If there is no dissent, the proposal is passed. Are there any objectors to the recommendation? If you do object, could you now please write RTS in the chat? Okay, given that there are no objectors, this recommendation has been approved. Thank you all very much, and that one's closed down. So item number 9, Alison, I think you're going to take us through this item, the Q3 budget monitoring.
Yes,
and the surplus is looking very healthy, so the Chair of Schools Forum's done a tremendous job, just to note that one. Right, move on, go on. Alison, over to you.
So this is the regular report that sets out the dedicated schools grant forecast position as at the end of December 2020 for the 2021 financial year. As at the end of December, the DSG was forecasting an in-year underspend of 2.1 million, the reasons for which are set out in detail within the report. I would just like to draw your attention to the following area, which is around the high needs. We were forecasting an underspend of 1.7 million, of which, as I say, there's further details in the report. The main cause of the underspend is the reduced number of pupils with education, health and care plans compared to what we were forecasting within the budget. We think the main cause of this is to do with the 2 COVID lockdowns that we've had, and that we are expecting those numbers to pick up as time goes forward. But because of the time it takes to do an EHCP, we don't expect to see those pressures until 21-22 financial year. And from the comments that Julia made earlier, it sounds like those numbers are starting to increase. So the net position provides a forecast carry forward of about 4.5 million as at the end of December. And as we stated, hopefully that will help to ease any pressures in the future to do with EHCPs. The recommendation is for noting, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, questions, folks? Sean.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just a question maybe for a future meeting as to whether I understand the principle behind holding the reserves back, but a £1.7 million underspend is not insignificant. I'm just wondering whether we may want to consider whether we would like to invest any of that underspend in more value-added activity that has a big impact, like some of the things Julia mentioned earlier, and whether that might be something we would want to consider. I know that would need to be balanced against a future in-year deficit, but it might be something to bring to a next meeting maybe.
Just to kind of put you there will be some calls on this carry forward. I think there's a couple of unknowns that we have got no way of actually calculating. The first one is our early years block. The early years block is normally adjusted around about July time based on the January census data. There's going to be changes in the way that they're counting pupil numbers and funding us over the 21-22 financial year for the early years block. So there are some concerns around what that overall impact will be on our funding. Also, with regards to the high needs, last year was a really unusual year. To have an underspend on high needs is extremely unusual. And until we really see the full impact of what that will mean on EHCP numbers over the course of this financial year, and then obviously the full year impact into future financial years, I think we do need to have a level of caution. However, I do recognise that there are potential things that we can put in place that might help to smooth any growth in high needs funding in future years that we may need to look at for the 22-23 budget. So it is something that it is considerable.
And I think that's the point. I think that's the point. Is there seems to be a potential short-term opportunity that we could take advantage of that might reduce future pressures in 22-23 and beyond. I think it'd just be worth keeping that thought process at the front of our minds when looking at this over future meetings. Thank you, Alison.
Yeah,
no, I think it's a good point. It would be nice to perhaps, Alison, when you feel we're in a position of more clarity, to maybe explore with members general principles about how we might want to spend any overspend, any carry forward we might have, rather than go into the nitty gritty. If members can give you a bit of a steer, would that be helpful?
That would probably be helpful. I'm conscious that obviously we were expecting to receive information with regards to the 22-23 funding over the next couple of months. And it might be useful then to talk to members in the autumn term about, A, we'll know the impact of the early years funding a lot better by then, and B, we'll have hopefully a steer as to what's going on nationally with the 22-23 funding, and then therefore that could be an area that we could talk to members about.
Okay, brilliant. So if in the autumn you can sort of, when you feel that the fog, the financial fog has lifted a bit and we're a bit clearer about where we are with these things you've mentioned, if we can maybe have an agenda item in the spirit of Sean's question around for us to give you some guidance about where Forum feels if there is any carry forward. So that's a big if there is any carry forward, where Forum would like some, those funds to be allocated. So that would be a good discussion to have in the autumn term. Okay, any other questions before we move to vote and ask someone to propose and second? Okay, so if there's no other questions from Alison, then it's recommended that the Schools Forum notes the forecast year-end budget position for the DSG as at the 31st of December 2020, together with the associated explanations contained within the report. Do I have a proposer, please? Don't be shy. You can do it more than once. Or if you haven't already, feel free to. Thank you. That was a proposer from is that Sean? Yeah. And do we need to propose? Is that Cher proposing? My screen's got. So Cher is seconding and Sean is proposing, I believe. No, Cara is seconding and Cher is proposing, I think. My screen's gone a bit.
I proposed, Sean here. I did propose.
You proposed, sorry. So Sean proposing and Cara Jewell is seconding. So the recommendation has been proposed and seconded. I will now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. If there is no dissent, the proposal is passed. Are there any objectors to this recommendation? If you do object, please now type RTS into the chat. Okay, no one has objected and therefore the recommendation has been approved. Thank you all very much. Okay, so we're now on to the last item, which is future school forums meetings. Gosh, okay, so I have to read something to you. Where are we now? So I have to read the following to you, that the Schools Forum are asked to consider whether they wish to proceed with virtual meetings going forward as permitted under the amended Schools and Early Years Finance Regulations 2021, or whether they wish to revert to face-to-face meetings. Should I put my cards on the table first? I am a big fan of virtual meetings, but recognise I have been in the city quite some time, and therefore the networking opportunities of face-to-face, I do recognise that people do miss out on the networking opportunities. Jason.
Thank you, Chair. Just wondering what officers and members felt was easier for themselves. I've got no real preference either way. Does this, mean it's easy for them to focus on their roles, and dial in? Councillors, do our councillors have any views? Lynn Stagg.
Hi, I'm happy either way. There's part of me that says it is so much easier not having to spend time commuting. I mean, I know it's not a huge distance, but it's and you can get back to work straight away. And I'm sure for a lot of the teachers as well, that would be very useful. But you're right. It's the social communication interaction that is missing. So perhaps we could do a mixture.
Yeah. So a blended approach is a proposal, which I think has got some merit. There's some hands going up. If you can type RTS in the chat, because my technical skills are being stretched to their absolute limit now. I can see hands going up, but if you can RTS it, please. Who's that? K is Mike Stoneman. Mike.
Yeah, just on behalf of officers, I mean, to be honest, this does work better for us. Having said that, we are happy to obviously support both options. But yeah, if we had a preference, then virtually does allow us to be more productive with our time.
Cara?
So, as someone who has multiple roles, for me, virtual works best. Could I make a suggestion that if we went to virtual, people were given the time at the end of a meeting if they wanted to talk socially once it had been stopped being streamed?
Like that.
Still get
like that. I think there's real legs in that. Very, very good idea, I think. Sean, Preston?
Yeah, my 2 pennies worth would be, I think virtual works really well in the majority of cases, but we may want to consider if there are particularly big or potentially contentious decisions, they should definitely be face-to-face. Having been involved in other forum meetings in other LA areas where there are difficult conversations to be had, my very strong opinion is they're much better had face-to-face rather than virtually. But I think the majority of business can be conducted virtually throughout the year, really.
Okay, thank you. Cher and then Dave. Cher.
Yes, I agree with both Cara and Sean. I think having some possibility of some social time either at the start or the beginning is good when it's not being screened. And I do agree virtual is much more convenient in terms of timing. But if there are anticipated to be tricky issues, then suggesting that we meet face to face would be better. So I think it's a pragmatic approach is a good idea.
Okay. Dave Jones?
Yeah, I think generally, I think virtually is the best way forward. But as Sean said, I think if something's difficult and we need to have a real deep dialogue, then I think face-to-face may be more appropriate.
Okay. Well, I think we have an emerging consensus that we are going to stick with virtual, that we are going to looking to open up a window to have virtual kind of social either before or after the meeting, which would be off the live stream, and also that where there were meaty issues of the day, we would come together as a group. And I think coming together at least once a year as a group would be not a bad move anyway, and we can have a mince pie or a Pimm's depending on the time of year. Right. Well, I don't know how Alison Edgerton, how does that give you enough to work on to develop future agendas, or have we been too open-ended there?
No, I think that gives us enough to work on. Right. So yes, we'll try and make sure we look at our future agendas and make sure that people are aware in plenty of time whether it's going to be a virtual meeting or whether it's going to be face-to-face. I would have thought the next meeting in July will be a virtual meeting because there's nothing majorly challenging coming to that meeting.
Yeah. In terms of this, which I think is a great idea, having a bit of a social, can we add on a 30-minute social slot at the end of next meeting? We'll do it at the end of the next meeting and the start of the meeting after, something like that, to see what people prefer. So should we go for a kind of a schools forum? It won't be live streamed, so this will be just really for forum members to reminisce about the good old days and all the rest of it, if that's okay. Right, just to remind folks, the next one is on the 7th of July 2021, then the 6th of October 2021, 1st of December, 19th of January 2022, and then the 9th of February 2022. All will be at 4:30. Assume they're virtually taking place virtually, unless we send out the siren call to everyone to come to Guildhall or civic offices. Well, I think that's it for us all. Thank you all from me. Once again, thanks to Dave for his brilliant chairing of previous meetings. You can see from the time what a terrible job I have done in comparison. And so my hat is firmly off to Dave Jones. He is officially the best chairman of Schools Forum. Thank you all. The live stream now, Lisa, can you end it? Thank you.
Yep, I'll just go and stop the live stream. Thank you.
And just to remind folk that it takes a few minutes to come off the live stream, so just be conscious